Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Elle. I'm a life coach and an ex-Jehovah's Witness. And so that's what I do. I coach ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. And I want to review this book today by Dr. Ramani. And it's called It's Not You. It's a New York Times bestseller. And it says, Identifying and Healing from Narcissistic People. And inside of the cover, it says, it's not always easy to tell when you're dealing with a narcissistic person. One day they draw you in with their charm and charisma, and the next day they gaslight you, wreck your self-esteem, and leave you wondering, what should I have done differently? And so I cannot even remember where I found this book or even heard about it, but I bought it because I wanted to compare the Jehovah's Witness religion to this narcissism. I wanted to see the similarities between the two. And so that's the reason that I bought this book. And along my journey, I discovered that I was most likely in a narcissistic relationship outside of the religion. So in an actual relationship with a partner, which came as quite a surprise. But as you can see, this book, I have tagged it up so many places. There's so much in here that when I wanted to write down the things, like the highlights, the things that I wanted to bring to you, the things that I think that might make a real big difference to you, maybe even if you never read the book. But if you want to read the book, wow, it is so good. I have to tell you, it for $29, which I probably got it on sale on Amazon. It's always a little bit less. For $29, this book really has changed my life. And I believe that it has the potential to change other people's lives too. And I was going to use it as a reference for, my clients and kind of refer to that narcissistic relationship, which that is what the Jehovah's Witness cult is. So with narcissism, there's about 7 different types of narcissism. They're all classified. They all have their own little characteristics, but it's all sort of on a spectrum too. So we all have those tendencies. Everybody has that tendency to be a little bit narcissistic. And sometimes you can hear that word just being thrown around in the news or the media of, or just people in general, like, oh, my boss, or, oh, my, who else? Like it could just be anybody that somebody in a public eye, a public figure, a president, it could be whoever, right? And so this word gets thrown around a lot, but this is an actual personality disorder. This is something that it can actually be diagnosed. And so within that, I just want to say that after reading this book, I realized why there is so many narcissists running around and why it goes really untreated is because the narcissists don't really believe that there's a problem. They don't believe that they have the problem. They believe that everybody else has the problem. So in me reading this book, it's taken me 2 months to read this book. I think this is probably the longest it's ever taken me to read a book, because I would take a little bit and I would read it and I would sort of digest it and consider it and think about it, and then I'd read a little bit more and then do the same thing. And in actuality, I just finished the book this morning, and today is the day after Christmas. And this book, it really has changed my life. So here's if you're asking yourself, well, what is narcissism? How would you know? And a big part of it is entitlement. So she talks about entitlement on page 9, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to go and highlight all of the pages and tell you the ones that really stood out to me, that really made the biggest impact on me. But basically the entitlement, meaning there's something special about me. The rules do not apply to me. I am a VIP where I go, and their rules are for other people, not for me. That's how a narcissist really thinks. They really believe that they're somehow above everything or so special. Another characteristic is deep selfishness. and a lack of empathy. And these are also the type of people that will shift the blame. They're excellent blame shifters. Um, Oh, for example, okay, if it was in the Jehovah's Witness organization, it's kind of like, oh, my ex is crazy. Like, don't listen to them. So let's say your ex. I'm talking about it like the people that have been disassociated or disfellowshipped. Do you know how they call these people apostates? You know, people call me an apostate. But they say, don't listen to them. It's a total blame shift, that they're taking all of the accountability off of them and calling the other person crazy. This is really, really common in narcissistic relationships. And so basically calling that ex like, oh, they're just crazy. So that could be in a partnering relationship, or the one type of narcissistic abuse is the one that is religious or spiritual. I think it's called just spiritual abuse. And so that's one type of narcissism. The other thing is that they expect robotic obedience. That's on page 22. And I thought that was so fascinating. So when I went through here, okay, page 22, it says, yeah, they expect a robotic obedience to their beliefs, and then they devalue emotion, human frailty, mistakes, and joy. Does that, okay, if you're an ex-witness, does that, or a witness, does that sound familiar? I mean, that's how sometimes I describe the Jehovah's Witnesses, like they're just, it's just like this blind obedience. And so that can happen when I'm saying all this, I'm not going to keep saying, back and forth, because it can really apply to both, and that's, anyway. There's also this, she talks about these riptides. So it like when you're thinking maybe you're going crazy, there's this riptide of abusive behavior where like they're abusing you. They have this abusive, behavior, and you want to run away. And then you have the guilt and the fear, and then you come running back. They devalue you, and then you have guilt and you come back. And it's just this back and forth thing of, and that could be great big waves and riptides, or little ones, and I think that is what happens when Jehovah's Witnesses start to really question things. They have this, you kind of going in and out of like, is this right? It doesn't feel right. But then you keep going back because you have guilt and fear, because you got your whole family stuck in, and you've got, Jehovah's always watching you. That's what you think. And so, yeah, that's what brings you back to the organization or to this toxic partnering relationship. On page 104, let's see, sorry. I don't edit these videos. I probably am going to start doing that, but I don't so far. So this is just pretty much like a live. Okay, so she talks about on page 105 that, or 104, it says it's like a you versus the world. The loss of trust that you experience as a result of narcissistic abuse can also extend to the fear of relying on other people. And I find this really common in the ex-Jehovah's Witness community, because we were abused as witnesses. We have a you versus the world mentality, and that makes it really, really, really hard for us to trust and rely on other people, because we never know if we can count on other people. She also talks about social anxiety, because after so much gaslighting, you believe that you're reading these social situations incorrectly, and then you've been told by the narcissistic person or organization that you sound foolish when you're around other people. And so you're like, it's like this constant questioning and doubting of yourself. And she says that, that sometimes you'll feel like, well, I'm just going to be safer if I'm just all alone. And so a lot of times that's how people, they feel in these relationships, because they have this fear of relying on anybody. On page 105, she talks about your mental health, and how your mental health may actually worsen during this time with the narcissist. So if you've been in this organization your whole life, wow, I I came back to the religion after I had been gone for, I think about over 10 years. And I had gone back to the religion. Oh my goodness. I could not believe that everybody was throwing around the words like anxiety and depression. And it was like severe anxiety, where people were just, and really like PTSD type symptoms, And this was pretty common in a lot of people that were overweight and unwell and unhealthy, and just, it was incredible. Like what I saw after being gone for 10 years from from my teenage years until, however long later, I think it would be my late 20s or 30s, 40s. Anyway, I was back and forth a lot because I was always questioning. I was always thinking that there was something wrong with me. And that's a really common thing in these relationships, that people are always thinking like that. And so she says that there's, on page 107, she talks about us, that sometimes because of that, people really aren't going to be taking good care of themselves when they're in these type of relationships. And so not taking care of yourself because everything that you do is for the narcissist, trying to think that, you're thinking that there's something wrong with you, but if you just did more for them, if you just did more, then maybe they could be happy and maybe they could love you and maybe they could see you for who you are. And what happens is you give so much of yourself that you really end up losing yourself, because narcissists are not caregivers. They're never going to take care of you. And you can see that with the Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, look at what happens when people spend their whole life as a pioneer, or their whole life as a Bethelite, their whole grown life. Basically, it's like their career. And then when Bethel doesn't need it anymore, they're just discarded, right? So that's a very common practice with narcissists. And then she talks about on page 138 about the scapegoat. So basically the scapegoat is like the person that is, they're just putting all the blame on that one person. It kind of reminded me of, a person that gets disfellowshipped and they're like, that person is like the scapegoat. And what happens is she also coined this term called family mobbing, where it's like that one person goes against the grain, that scapegoat, and then there's this family mobbing where the whole family or congregation gangs up on that person and really like, so it'd be like shunning. Family mobbing would be like shunning. And they have the way of dealing with things, and I've seen this in narcissistic families, like actual families outside of the religion, that they have this way of, it's this mentality of like, if you see something, say nothing. If you see it, don't say anything. And that's on page 145. And I've experienced that in personal relationships. And if you look at the Jehovah's Witness religion as a whole, we see something out here as, if you want to call us apostates, we see a lot of stuff, but they don't want us to say anything. It's like, don't call me out. Please don't call me out, right? They love that. That's how they operate. That's on page 145. And so if you think about it, how much of ourselves have how much of ourselves have we given up to the religion? Or if you're in a relationship, to the relationship? How many times did you bend and break and cooperate and hide and diminish yourself and just try so hard to be better, thinking that there's something wrong with you? Like, how much of you have you given up? Because how many times have you spoken up for what you really want? We never knew what we wanted. We never even knew that that was even a possibility. And so on page 178, she talks about the ick list. So she talks about ways where she takes you through like different exercises and rituals where you can really like release this, and it's called the ick list. And that's just one of, I think, 6 that she has in the book. It's talking about writing down all the things that you've lost. For me, when I wrote my ick list, I said, I never was able to celebrate a birthday. I was kicked out of the classroom to go to the library when I was a kid. I didn't get up to salute. I couldn't salute the flag. I had to sit down during the national anthem. Things like that. I never had a, quote, normal relationship, right? Things like that, where all the things that we've given up of ourselves that we never were able to experience, I put that all on an ick list. And I took that list, it was a few pages long, and I took it out and I ripped it up. And you'll see that video if you go back. It's called Letting Go, is what it says on the cover. And I tore up all these pages and I let it go. I let all of it go. And it sounds like, oh, what's the big deal? You wrote down some things and you ripped up, you let it go. Like, what's the big deal? But there was something about it that was very therapeutic, and something about it that just made me feel so much lighter and almost recognize, like, yeah, that did happen. It did happen. So whether you're experiencing spiritual narcissistic abuse, or if you are in a narcissistic relationship, you can write yourself an ick list either way. What are all the things that you've given up about you? If you're in a relationship, how many times did you bend and, well, okay, sure, that's fine, or, they shame you and make you feel like there's something wrong with you. How many times did you give in like that, thinking there's something wrong with you? And then before you know it, all these years pass and you're like, who the hell am I anyways? Because I've just been doing all of these things that they want from me, and now I don't even know what I want. It could be that with a religion or a relationship. It's kind of the same. It's different, but it's the same. And so she talks about on page 182, like a toxic cleanup. She says, if cleaning out a closet brings joy, cleaning out toxic people must feel like ecstasy. And so she's talking about just cleaning up our space, cleaning up all this toxicity. And so talking about purging social media, and also, if you still have to stay in a relationship with that person, maybe putting like a little something next to their name, so it's a reminder to you of, like, this person's pretty toxic for you. Maybe it's your mom, maybe it's your sister, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a religion, an elder, maybe it's even your boyfriend, could be. On page 185, she talks about multiple truths, how we can really have this cognitive dissonance and that it's okay to hold multiple truths, like, I love them and I never want to see them again. That's okay. It's okay to hold multiple truths at one time. And she says that when you are able to do that, that you're really, really close to breaking through, because having that cognitive dissonance means that you're about to go one way or the other. It's a really good indicator that things are really starting to make a big shift. And on page 188, it's talking about, if you have lost yourself, here are some questions to ask yourself on page 188. And so these are really good. If you want, you could write these down. She says try asking yourself the following questions. And this is when she started talking about having radical self-acceptance, which just means really accepting yourself, knowing yourself very, very deeply to the core. What do I like about myself? Okay, and what don't I like about myself, but really can't change or don't want to change? And question 3, what don't I like about myself and I can change? And question 4, what am I about? Ooh, for us ex-witnesses, that is an awesome question. What are you about? If you are not a Jehovah's Witness, what is your identity? What are you about? And then question number 5, what matters to me? And I could see how I haven't done this exercise, but I could see how that would be really challenging, especially if you're inside of the religion, inside of a narcissistic relationship. What matters to you? I mean, you don't even know at a certain point sometimes. I mean, to answer these 5 questions, somebody would have to dig really, really deep. And in fact, that's something that I want to do. And it's something that I do when I'm reading these books. And it's a self-help style book. Every time that it comes across an exercise, I like to do the exercises. And sometimes that's why it takes me forever to read them, because I really want to do the work and get the most out of the book. But that's one that I still need to do. Um, on page 193, she talks about how they shame and they blame you, and then we take the responsibility, um, even when we don't believe it. And then the relationship, and then we believe that, and then the relationship stops working. I want to look on page 193. I feel like I'm giving a talk. If y'all are witnesses or ex-witnesses, hey, let's all turn to page 193. Okay, she says the narcissistic person projects their shame onto you, and then you, because you're empathetic, which I'm an empath, and an accountable person, you may receive it, integrate it, blame yourself, and ultimately take responsibility for all the toxicity inside the relationship. Wow. And she says the day that you finally accept that the narcissistic dynamic will not change and that it has nothing to do with you is the day that the cycle shifts. And that is also the day that the relationship stops working. It's not working anymore because you're enlightened, right? You're like, what the hell? It's not just me. Like, there's something else going on here. And so she talks about grieving what we never received. Now, if you have been in the religion your whole life, there's no way that you can go back and redo your childhood. So that is going to be a big grieving process, to grieve what we never received. And then she also talks about we can experience this loss even if we decide to stay in the relationship or in the organization, in the religion. And I like the way that she went through. I mean, there is a big section of the book, not big, but there's a pretty good big size of the book that says, hey, if you're going to stay in this relationship, maybe it's for, financial reasons, maybe it's for your kids, maybe it's for, with Jehovah's Witnesses, like your whole family's in the religion, what are you going to do? So she gives a really good section of the book talking about that, if you are going to stay. And she says, and I think that would happen right around page 200. And then on page 199, she talks about do not avoid the grief. And I'm a real big advocate of that, in my coaching, my clients, like, please do not pass through the grief. Like, you have to go through it. At first, you might be really angry, pissed off, resentful, and just a lot of like really strong emotions. But underneath that, once you kind of get through that part and you dig a little bit deeper, you're going to see that there's this really deep sadness, this really deep grief. And so we cannot avoid that grief. This is how we're able to process through the pain and to get to the other side of this. We cannot push it down. We cannot smush it down. We cannot avoid it or ignore it or anything else. We must go through it. And so she talks about that on page 199. And then on 204, she says, please do not ever wait for an apology. It's extremely rare. Narcissists do not apologize. So if you're looking for closure and you're looking for somebody to apologize to you or the organization or a partner, it's not probably going to happen, because because narcissists, they just don't really think that there's anything wrong with them. So there would be no reason why they would actually make an apology to you. It's extremely rare. So please don't wait on that. And then there's this, on page 206 is all the rituals. I have to read these to you. Because of copywriting reasons, I can't, go through and just read a whole bunch of this book, but I can tell you that doing these exercises that she has in this book could really, really help somebody. She talks about the importance of therapy and processing grief. So getting a therapist, because you're going to want to talk about it with somebody that's able to help you. And in fact, for me, because I have just recently left a narcissistic relationship, I'm going back to therapy as a life coach. I have a life coach and now I have a therapist, and I've been to therapy in and out for many years, and I think it's a great thing. It doesn't mean that anything's gone wrong. It means that you really just want to get better and you really want to know yourself better. I had no idea about any of this until I got this book, and now there's no unseeing what I've seen. She also talks about support groups, getting in support groups, because they give you the opportunity to be with other people who get it and can validate your experience and your reality. And if you cannot afford a therapist, yes, groups are wonderful for that, because they're usually a very discounted price too, and you're going to build up this whole community of people that can really help you. And so she talks about these grief rituals, like having some sort of funeral or ceremony to let go of the relationship. And that's sort of what you'll see me do on this video that is called Letting Go. That was sort of like my funeral, or my like letting go of all this paper. It's like this confetti just was flying everywhere. She also talked about writing regrets on a rock and dropping it into a lake or an ocean. And after I realized that I was in a narcissistic relationship, what I believe to be. Of course, this person is not diagnosed. Narcissists are very, very rarely diagnosed, but I was able to do this, writing down all my regrets on a paper. I tied it around a rock and I flung it into the water, and that felt really, really good. And I think the more of these rituals, the better. I mean, I think after that, and you can go watch both of those back. I felt pretty awesome afterwards. It is a really, really good feeling, just letting go. She also talks about having a birthday for yourself. If you're a Jehovah's Witness and do you celebrate the day that you woke up, or maybe the day that you disassociated yourself, or the day that you were disfellowshipped? These birthdays are really significant, and so we don't want to just pass over them. We really want to celebrate and recognize, like, you really left, like, this was such a cool thing. She also talks about switching up your space, tossing the items that remind you of the toxic relationship, which I did too. I did that with a closet cleanse, and I did the before, during, and after, and I got rid of all of my Jehovah's Witness clothes, because I still had a lot of really nice pretty dresses and dress coats and shoes and different things, and I got rid of all of that stuff. And then she talks about taking back important places, like taking back, instead of letting that actual place belong to that relationship, going back there and like redoing it. And she talks about get some friends together, dress up, and fill the spaces with laughter and joy. Or go with one trusted friend and take it slow. And she says, this can feel really difficult to do alone, but let your laughter replace the abusive memories that may fill these special spaces. I thought about going to like the assembly hall, and I don't know what I would do, but and it's not like I would have to take back that place. And the kingdom halls, they're not really like in my daily sight every day, but I don't know, when I was reading that, I sort of pictured the assembly hall for some reason. And then the last one she says is create a grief box. Write down all the losses from the narcissistic relationship on little pieces of paper. Things that you gave up, parts of yourself that you lost, experiences that you missed out on, hopes that you sacrificed, and put them in a box. Consider it a strange coffin of sorts. And knowing that these losses can be put somewhere can be a practice that pushes you to let them go, and then makes room for you to evolve into yourself. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, that's page 208, and I loved all of those grief exercises that she talked about. Okay, and then here's another one. She talked about if you are being gaslit, which means that basically the other person is repeating. They're making you think that you are actually going crazy because they're like, oh no, it didn't happen this way. This is how it happened, but you don't remember because you were, you were whatever, right? I remember. And then they make you, and then you're like, oh my gosh, am I going crazy? Like, I'm pretty sure that it happened this way. And they will continually do that to you because it's a way of really, it's a way of really making you crazy. And so they talk about doing a gaslighting journal where every time that this happens, and I've done this ever since that she was talking about this, and this helped a lot for me to write it down and like, wait a second, that's what they said is not really what happened. This is what happened. And then I even took it a step further for myself, and I did a recording of somebody trying to gaslight me, and it was pretty fascinating watching it back because yeah, um I was being gaslit. I'm like, what? That's not how it happened. And oh, that's so weird that you skipped over all of these other details. But yeah, taking a journal and writing these things down is really important because a lot of times they will try to bring these things back up too, and then you have to remind yourself, oh yeah, I'm not crazy. They're just gaslighting me, so that you can feel a little bit less crazy. And page 234, she talks about a 12-month cleanse. And so this page 234, this is when everything changed for me. 234 is when I realized I'm in one of these relationships. And she says okay, so she talks about okay, when you have recently left a narcissistic relationship, it's very common for you to fall that there's this period of really high risk for getting back into a narcissistic relationship. And so if you're leaving the witnesses, you want to be really careful and give yourself at least a 12 months to cleanse. She says a 12-month cleanse because the things that what you don't want is when you're in the middle of that transition is for you to fall into another narcissistic relationship, which I had no clue about until a few weeks ago. And then looking back, yes, that's exactly what happened. I went straight from the religion to a relationship within a few months, you know. From me leaving the religion, I think I left in July, and or I left in the summertime, and I was in a relationship by October. And so that was a couple of months of me. But in the religion, I'm thinking, or when I had woken up, I'm thinking, okay, let's get on with it. Let's go out and date, and I want to find my person. I'm so ready. I'm ready, ready, ready. Like I'm free, And then I ended up falling into this. Take this with a grain of salt, but this is my belief that there was some that he was a narcissist, or at least that's the way he treated me. So she says, be really careful on page 235 about these transitions. And then on page 237, she talks about perfection being the enemy of good. And this is such a cool thing because she says that perfectionism is a defense and coping strategy for most survivors of narcissistic abuse, who hold the eternal hope that if you could get yourself or the relationship just right, then everything would be better. And isn't that the truth inside the religion? Oh, if we just did better, if we just did more, stop your complaining, with your anxiety and depression, like get out in service, go to the meetings, just do better. It's like this push for to be perfect. And she says you have to be okay with good enough. Like perfection is just not gonna happen. Okay, on page 246 she talks about okay, and this was so good for me to read. She says, you can stay in this relationship, but just know that it's never gonna change. the part of the radical self, or the radical acceptance of the relationship, just knowing it's never going to change. They're always going to be this way. You can stay if you want, but she says that healing is really more important than leaving. The healing part is more important. And so she said, if you decide that you want to stay in a relationship like this, just know that it's sort of like living in a smoker's house, that over time you will probably get hurt. It's just kind of bound to happen. The other thing that she says is that the boundaries, they don't work with narcissists. So as a life coach, I teach my clients boundaries, and it's so funny because, you know, Jehovah's Witnesses, they think that shunning somebody is their boundaries. It's not. That is a manipulation and control. Boundaries, that is not how boundaries sound. But it doesn't matter anyways, because narcissists don't understand boundaries, and they never work with them anyways. So she stresses the having low contact, and she also talks about this gray rock. It's sort of like when you talk to somebody and you know they're a narcissist, like a really great way to not argue with them all the time is to play gray rock. So it's just basically stating the facts. There's no, you know, you kind of leave the emotion to the side. It's just the facts. And a lot of times just sort of, yeah, you're right. Okay, you're agreeing with them, because it's almost like just kind of, you know, that nothing that you say, you're never going to win, right? So if you agree with them, you're just going to avoid an argument or a fight. So and she says you don't want to go deep, and deep meaning DEEP, meaning defend. Don't defend yourself. Don't engage with them. Don't try to explain any of it, because they are not going to understand any of it. And then don't ever personalize anything, because it's just not going to help. And she says, if you decide to go to therapy, just know that you're doing it for you, not them. Okay, we can only fix us. We cannot fix them. On 292, it talks about forgiveness. So we have to really forgive ourselves. We have to see everything really clearly so that we can heal. Otherwise, we're really doomed to repeat this whole thing again. And that was huge for me. That's when I'm like, you know what? I will go to therapy, because I do not want to go through this again. This was enough for me. This was a first-time experience. Well, it's not a first-time experience because I was raised in a narcissistic relationship or a religion, but I had never been in a relationship like that before. This was my first time. She says, if you're not, you know, healing and you're not seeing it clearly, then you are going to repeat it. So on page 295, she talks about forgiveness. One sec. She says, oh my gosh, this is so sweet, because she says, she says, otherwise we remain disconnected from the experience and are doomed to ruminate and perhaps even repeat it. She says that it can take years. This is going to be very comforting to you. It can take years or even decades to get out of these adult narcissistic relationships. And after you get out, you might blame yourself, saying, how could I have been so stupid? Why didn't I see it sooner? Maybe I didn't try hard enough. How much of it was my fault? Maybe I created this monster. And here's the thing. She talked about in a previous chapters about how usually you're not even, there's a few telltale signs that you might be in a narcissistic relationship, but it may take a year or possibly longer for like the real monster to come out. And so it can be really confusing, you know, because nobody ever taught us this. In fact, in the religion, they taught us that that's the way it's supposed to be. So of course we'd be drawn to those sort of relationships on the outside, right? But all we wanted to do is just to be loved, to be cherished, to be protected, to fall in love with someone, to be treated with kindness, with compassion and respect, to be treated equitably. So equitably means if somebody is a little bit below, you just boost them up a little bit. That's called equity. And if somebody doesn't know what that means, it would behoove you to really look that up and look into it, because um, it's a good thing. It's a really, really good thing. And I know that some people don't know what that means. And it's kind of, yeah, we need to know that word equitably. If somebody is a little bit below you, boost them up. Like, we don't have to be equals. We don't have to be equals in everything. We're not going to be equals. We're men and women and children and teenagers, and we're all kinds of people. But, you know, if you see somebody beside you and you're at the ball game and somebody's in a wheelchair and they can't quite see over to see the game, it's kind of like boosting them up. Give them a little boost. Like, give them your chair that's going to help them boost up, right? That's what equity is talking about. So, and all we wanted was to receive like basic empathy. That's all we wanted, right? That's all we wanted. And it's actually quite impossible with this type of relationship, because all you're going to get is gaslighting, invalidation, rage, which also could be quiet rage. There's quiet rage, contempt, dismissiveness, and cruelty. And here's the thing, you did nothing wrong. So forgiving yourself is a really key part to working through the grief. She talked about survivor to thriver. So thriving isn't, if we're going to get past this relationship and thrive, thriving is not about going back to that person that you were. It's not going back to the old you. She says, you've been changed by this experience. We're not going back there. Thriving is not in the day-to-day survivalist slog of decoding, confusion, anxiety, and self-doubt. Nor is it simply just coping and getting through. So she says thriving is, she said thriving is, sometimes it sounds like, I went through the entire day and I didn't hear their voice in my head once. And I think that often, not only from the Jehovah's Witnesses, but this relationship as well that I just went through. And yeah, when I'm not hearing their voice in my head say, oh, you're not doing that right, or you could do that better, or, you know, yeah, or don't do that, it's going to be really bad. Yeah, when that person does not even factor into our decisions or our experience, we're going to start feeling pretty good. So the closure, she says, the closure is you moving forward, because sometimes you're not going to get the closure from them. There may not be any closure, because you have to remember, they really believe that they did nothing wrong. So there is not going to be any closure, most likely, in these types of relationships. So the closure has to be you, me, we're moving on, and then not having our sense of purpose stolen by them. That is closure in these sorts of relationships. So she talks about another thing at the end here about rewriting our fairy tale. She says that a lot of us were raised on fairy tales, and they really enforce these gender roles, and they punish us being individuals, and they glorify everything about narcissistic relationships. Hello, love bombing, right? About forgiveness, obedience, grandiosity. Yeah, this was a fabulous book. This book really did change my life, and I don't see things the same anymore. So in closing, she says that after years or a lifetime of being gaslit, manipulated, invalidated, minimized, of being told that you're not enough, that there's something wrong with you, that you have no right to feel the way you do, of wondering, what is it? What am I doing wrong? What can I do better? How can I be better? You finally and fully recognize it's not you. You are not the problem. So that is my I guess my review, or the highlights of the book that I loved the most. You know, what looked like weakness to that person was actually empathy and strength. They looked at us like we were so weak. But, you know, narcissists only prey on really good people. So that's kind of cool to know, right? We have good hearts. We're good-hearted people. And if you have been preyed on by a narcissist, I'm so sorry, because it can be a lot to untangle, and there's not a lot of therapists out there that really understand all of this, but there is a few, so I believe that there is help for us. But yeah, if you're going through it, I really recommend this book. In fact, she's on YouTube as well. She has tons of interviews on YouTube. So I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to this really long review of this book, because I believe that if you're an ex-witness, it's for you. And if you are a witness inside the organization, it's for you. If you're in a relationship where you're like, oh my gosh, am I going crazy? It's for you. You might want to just check it out just to make sure. Okay, well, thanks so much, everyone, for being here. I appreciate you, and we'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye.